Hi, and welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Today on the show, we welcome back Amy Vertrees. She is a general surgeon and she wrote the Kevin MD article, Stop Resisting the Imposter. Amy, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and coming back on the show.
Thanks, Dr. Poe. Really, it's just a true honor to be on the show. I mean, I really appreciate you letting us share our stories, just so we can hear like the wide diversity that there is in medicine. I think it's a fantastic mission.
So for those who didn't listen to our first episode, can you just briefly share your story and journey to where you are today?
Sure, absolutely. I'm a general surgeon, actually trained in the Army. So I went to USUS, which is the military medical school. It's the only one we have. I went to Walter Reed Army Medical for general surgery training. I was there when the first war injured soldier was there for the heights of the wars. Went to Afghanistan twice, Iraq myself once. I got out of the military in 2017, and I've been a general surgeon at Murray Regional and Columbia, Tennessee ever since then.
So we're speaking towards the end of September from a COVID standpoint, where you are and your institution, perhaps. Tell me what you're seeing.
It's like utter madness. Like a year ago, we had a huge peak. There's just been we have a low vaccination rate. And so last year was a little bit challenging, but I think that the community came together a lot. And this year is a little bit interesting because we still have, now that the vaccine is available, we have low vaccination rates still. And our hospital has just been overwhelmed. We have a 26 bed ICU and a 250 bed hospital. And we have been running in the mid 400s for ICU patients, and those like in the mid high 30s of patients, doubling up on hospital beds. The reason I was running a little bit late was that I was doing a tracheostomy, which, really just doing whatever I could to support our ICU colleagues. And so, assisting with tracheostomies, helping out wherever possible, because we really just have amazing heroes out there.
So when it comes to vaccine hesitancy, I hear a lot of stories about people who unfortunately are in the ICU or in the hospital and they wish they could have got the vaccine. Are you seeing some of that regret from some of the patients that you're seeing in the hospital?
It was so fascinating. This has been such a fascinating experiment with a social construct, because there was one that I did a tracheostomy on, and I called the wife, and she's like, he's so strong, he's so healthy. We didn't think this could happen to us, and so we've, as a result, told all of our friends to get vaccinated, because if it could happen to him, it could happen to anyone. And I think that's probably the take-home message that a lot of people are taking, is looking around, and it really hits home when it's someone that and that is healthy, that takes care of themselves. And then it's just a freak thing how some people just are so affected by it and others are not.
All right, let's transition now into your most recent Kevin MD article. It's titled, Stop Resisting the Imposter. Now, for those who didn't get a chance to read your article, can you just walk my audience through it and share the story of why you decided to write it?
Absolutely. It was interesting. It was based on a Facebook post that I was reading, and about someone who was offered a speaking position, who was very well known in their own area, and had mentioned how she was thinking about turning down the speaking gig because you're like, well, who am I to do this? And then had talked to a colleague who was also offered, I think it was a panel, and was like, well, why is he so secure? And I was like, what an interesting way to kind of approach the problem. And so that's, what we imagine as imposter syndrome of we say, like, why would they pick me? Like, I don't know if I could do this. And then it was interesting. The attention was projected on a colleague. And so I kind of started thinking about, how do we approach imposter syndrome? What is the point of all of it, honestly? And really what I think in my mind, and this is actually not a new concept of, we have like these multiple like people in our head, like and I started thinking, like, if we think of this imposter as a person in our head that's just trying to keep us safe, because there is a part of our brain that says, don't do that scary thing, don't do that hard thing. It's so much safer to do these other things. And that's pretty much what the imposter does, is they sit us down and say, like, don't do this because you don't know what you're doing. But I thought, think it through rather than just try to resist it. Say, oh, no, they don't know what they're talking about. No one else knows what they're talking about. Of course, I'm fine. What happens is that insecurity is always going to be there. And so if you imagine it in a position like, like a child or someone vulnerable, and you sit them down and say, what's really on your mind? Why don't you tell me what your concerns are, and let's talk it through. And what I think what that does is, like, if we resist it, then the first thing we do is we hide. Okay, well, we don't put ourselves out there. We don't want to confront the possibility that it may be right. But if we sit down and say, like, of course we know what we're doing, why don't we, just explore it? What's the worst that could happen? And it really goes down to a lot on recognizing that we're worthy, even if we didn't do that. Even if we didn't choose to do the speaking gig, that, we're fine as we are. And if we sit down with our imposter and say it's okay to be safe to try some of these, experiments and see what we can do and show what we can do. If we walk in feeling worthy, we're not going to worry that we need to get worthiness from someone else. And in response to, like, looking around at colleagues and seeing how they respond, we only see people's outer responses anyway. This other panelists who seem so reassured may not be. But either way, if you approach it from worthiness and you approach it from openness and get excited about the possibility, then you're actually able to interact with, other panels and other experts, and really and elevate the knowledge in that way, because you're not so much stuck in your head.
So there are a lot of articles on Kevin MD about imposter syndrome, in medical students, interns, residents, and physicians. And you think that physicians are among the most accomplished individuals, right? They're top of the class. You get into medical school, you do board exams, and, being a physician is, of course, an accomplished position. Why do you think so many doctors feel imposter syndrome in light of everything they've accomplished in the past?
It's so interesting because, I think that it's really embracing the positive aspects of this person that we call the imposter, in our head. Because what makes us want to do more? If we are feeling like an imposter, basically is saying, like, I'm not sure we can do it. And if you flip that over and say, like, well, I'm not sure I could do it. Why don't we just do it anyway? But that's a lot of time what drives us is, let's see what we're capable of. And if you find yourself at the tip of the spear and you find yourself at your highest level of accomplishment, of course you're going to look around and go, you're not going to succeed all the time. And I think that goes into this, really the ultimate definition of success and failure. And, I've explored this a lot on my own and also with other folks. Because, what is success? Success is achieving a defined goal. And which is fascinating when you look at it, because who defines these goals? And a lot of times, if we define these goals, what happens if we don't achieve it? We have to make sure that we'll be okay if we don't. And failure is not achieving that goal. So, but what is the worst that could happen if you don't achieve the goal? You just restate the goal, or you learn something. And I think that being able to be open to failure and determining your own success, and by aiming to achieve something higher than you think you can, of course we're going to fail along the way. And I think the trouble that a lot of people have, especially once they finish medical school and residency, is everything is so linear. Medical school, you just pass a test. It's very defined. So that success, that goal is defined. You pass a test, you go. Residency, you get a certain number of cases, and you're fine. And as attendings, then you have to really start defining what your goals are. And so then you're the one that's much more responsible for setting up these goals. And so if you set them up high, of course you're going to fail at some of them, because that means that you're really working at the top level of your accomplishments. And so if you're not failing, you should really look around and say, like, am I really achieving the amount of success that I could have?
So I know that you're also a co-founder of a women surgeon coaching group. Now, do you have a story of a case study of a physician who is encountering imposter syndrome, and what did you do to help advise that physician?
Oh, I think it's a great example, because really it's all just the thoughts that we tell ourselves. And, if you kind of separate out this idea that I can't do it as a separate part of your brain, and you really look at their motivation, and then I take them through and say, like, what's your thought? Okay, so you want to be on this panel, and your thought is that I'm not as accomplished as other people. Well, is that really true? Let's look at some facts. What have you done in the past? What would make you feel worthy of accomplishing that? And really ask a lot of questions, and realizing that when you start challenging that thought that pops up in your head, that's absolutely urgent and must be true. Then when you challenge that thought, you realize, oh, well, that's actually not even true in the first place. And we were judging our emotions and our actions and our thought, or our results, based on a thought that was never actually true in the first place. And the problem is that we're built to, especially, as surgeons, to problem fix it, fix it, and we don't really focus a little bit on like challenging the thoughts, like, is this true? Because we're so used to, believing what we think. And so, and being confident, and realizing that sometimes when you're achieving something, a little bit lack of confidence is normal. And I think the more that we normalize it and help people question those things, those thoughts in your mind, that's how we're going to help people achieve.
We're talking to Amy Vertrees. She is a general surgeon, and she wrote the Kevin MD article, Stop Resisting the Imposter. Amy, what kind of advice and take-home messages can you leave with the Kevin MD audience?
I think the more that we share these stories, like these worries that we have in our head, the one thing that we have at the Common Thread is a free Facebook group for women surgeons and for residents as well. And, we share our normal struggles daily. And what has happened, we've had this group for about a year now. And then we find that other members start sharing it. And then other people are saying, I'm glad you shared that. I'm thinking this too. And so I think really the more that we normalize the thoughts that we have in our head, the more that we support each other, that's really the way to do this is, supporting ourselves internally, but then also supporting as a community. I think that's where we're going to make the big changes.
And how can people reach you?
So we're on Facebook at the Common Thread Women Surgeons, and also we have a website with the same title, and I also have a personal website, amyvertreesmd.com.
Amy, thank you so much again for coming back on the show and sharing your time and insight.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so glad I made it.